Hey, and welcome to Perceptual. Just wondering if you've ever felt like no matter what you achieve that it's never enough. You know, like you're constantly running a race and always falling behind. I know I have. If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. And behind this, I found that there was a real need to feel special. What do you mean? What do you mean? Look, I've spent a lot of time practicing getting over myself on this one, and it's taken me quite a while. I'm Chris, and today I want to share something deeply personal. It's been my struggle with achievement addiction. Achievement addiction. Who the hell is addicted to achievement? And it's not all that it's cut out to be. I'm not talking about the people that are achieving. I'm not talking to people that are doing well or not. It doesn't matter. Kudos to them, and I wish them all the best. The point is that no matter what and how much you achieve, it's actually the harsh reality of chasing external validation. And for as long as I remember, I believed that it was something that was fundamentally wrong with me. Like everyone else had life figured out, and I feel that I was stuck running in a race where I was always running dead last, and I hated that feeling. I was unwilling to admit any vulnerability, and it wasn't just about feeling behind. I took those things and I turned it into something far more toxic. The problem of achievement addiction. Let's think about that. I spent years driven by the need to feel special, to stand out, to prove that I wasn't as flawed as I believed. But no matter how much I achieved, no matter how many milestones that I hit, successes that I had, things that I acquired, money, just never made me feel like enough. Instead of fulfillment, I found myself that constantly sinking myself into deeper doubt. Even better, I experienced social anxiety or performance anxiety, defined by whether that going to the toilet, whether that be doing tests or exams or at school, whether that be giving presentations. And I operated with the assumption that others were extremely judgmental and the world was a hyper-competitive place. Maybe it was too much David Attenborough when I was a kid. But it's just that constant feeling of that falling behind. There was a time when I truly believed that I was actually broken, that there was something fundamentally wrong with me. This belief shaped everything, how I saw myself, how I viewed others, how I interacted with the world. And I'm actually embarrassed to admit it, but while striving for success, I was so cruel to myself as a constant internal tyrant, holding myself, keep going. There's a difference, I think, between David Goggins and these guys driving themselves in the military 80s and that military tyrant drill sergeant, to keep going and motivated. But I think there's another thing to actually beat yourself into the ground internally. And there's nowhere to go, by the way. And it's even worse if you don't know you're doing it. I think it's then impossible standards that you can never meet. For example, giving a presentations, I shouldn't feel nervous. By definition, you are, right? This constant state of shame became my norm. Outside, I'd appear fine internally, and all those moments are by yourself, when you're with yourself. I felt bad about feeling bad, inadequate about feeling inadequate, and trapped by this vicious cycle of self-criticism and disappointment. So what's the big deal? These thoughts weren't just harmless insecurities, they had real consequences in my life. They dictated how I lived my life, how I treated myself, how I interacted with others. And it was like being under a spell, caught in the cycle of shame and relentless need to feel special. The worst part, I didn't even realize how destructive it was because I felt so normal to me. Looking back, I see how much pain I caused myself and believing that I was always running last in this race of life. So what? I think it's really embarrassing again to admit how deep it went. But I do so because I know that there are others that are out there that might be caught up in this self-hypnosis. And the hardest part was, just letting go on the need to feel special. Dare to be average. It was recognizing that part of my thinking was fundamentally flawed, and our brains take shortcuts over time, and these cognitive errors become default patterns if you're not careful, or what David Burns would call fractals. These are the repeating small things that repeat throughout your life. How you beat yourself up on the Tuesday is exactly the same way that you'll be beating yourself up on the Thursday. And there are traps, and it keeps us stuck, and I think feeling like we're always falling short. It's been a long journey to break this spell for me, and at first it was really hard to see that my thoughts weren't facts. That's a difference, right? Being in your thoughts versus thinking about your thoughts, being the thought versus you're the human being or the biological experience of having a thought. And they were just thoughts shaped by shears of distorted thinking. We could talk maybe it's evolution, we could talk maybe it's background, maybe, who knows what it is. They could be shortcuts, and you know, our ancestors, if there's something sideways, it's far better than we're being alive, who we're jumping or catastrophizing or what it might be. Again, I don't pretend to know why. There's good arguments and good theories about why that would happen. Various reasons, biological reasons, who knows? I don't know. What I do know, and what I can speak to, is the act of having them. And I had to learn to step back, to get some distance from these thoughts and realize that I'm not my thoughts. It is quite a humbling process, and one that forces you really confront the flawed beliefs that you've held on to for so long. I'm very science and empirically oriented, and it's quite a disruptor to realize that, you know, your thinking actually is pretty flawed. It's also flawed, and maybe from this, again, needing to be perfect, and thinking is that a lot of thinking can be governed by emotions and governed by instincts, and good argument for, you know, how much actual control have you got over this, or even the need for excessive control. But again, I'm not here to argue any of that. What I am here to talk about is that in this series that I'll be walking through each of these cognitive distortions in detail. Personally, I found them challenging to actually remember. You know, there's 10 to 12 of them, and then even harder to recognize in the moment. So that's why I want to dedicate time to each one, so you can see clearly and understand how they operate, learn to break free from their grip, and these distortions can choke the life out of you if left unchecked. There's an analogy in martial arts where a lot of the time they actually spent the first 12 months actually teaching you how to get out of holds. And that's how I see this. Often you'll catch yourself, you'll end up in relapse, you'll be thinking about things, but the idea is to actually get you free, and so you can break three of these holds. And I find that if you can know that you can get yourself out, you're far more committed to lean into life, into the things, because you're more committed to what you're doing. But once you spot them, you can start to loosen their hold. Finding a new measure of success. What does that mean? Well, what I've learnt, that breaking free from this addiction to achievement, isn't just about achieving less, right? This is not about saying doing less. This is not saying about giving up. This is not about any of that, right? What it is about is actually the focus or the dependency or the addiction to it. Nothing wrong with playing video games, but if you can't give them up, it's an issue. Nothing wrong with having alcohol on a certain time, but if it starts to rule your life, you're in trouble. Sex addiction, dopamine addictions, pick your thing, money, success, sex, goals, you name it, right? But the point is that you can have pieces of these, but when there's a need and it feels like something that is under attack, and you don't even know what that is in a conversation when someone's giving you feedback, and you can't take that feedback because it feels like a personal attack. Or if you're in a conversation where you can't feel something is under attack, you think that you're arguing over something, but it's never about the thing. There's an underlying value that feels like it's under threat, and worse if you don't know what that value is. But it is redefining about what success is altogether. For me, it's moving away from the external validation and towards something more meaningful. And meaningful for me is living by my own values. That's easy to say, right? Very easy to say, harder to do, especially if you don't know what they are. And I certainly didn't for a long time. The good news, the really good news, is there's lots of methods out there to actually do this. And the better news is actually that if you don't know who you are and you feel like your identity is all over the shop, I found, and evidence for it, strong evidence for it, that your emotions are really almost like these exception errors to the things for your values. So your values are being expressed no matter what. And you'll find that they're actually expressed under these underlying thoughts that you're holding on to, or even the underlying negative emotions that you're experiencing. But we'll get to that later. It's a big leap. So it wasn't easy, and it does take time to figure out who I really was beneath those layers of self-doubt and perfectionism. But slowly, I began to find the joy in the simple things. For example, being present in the small moments of connection, and is just being enough, right? Walking the dog, the presence of the dog. What I love about dogs is that the only thing you expect from a dog is to be a dog. So why am I sharing this, right? This is an example because I haven't been specifically caught up in toxic productivity. You know, you see this all over the internet. You see people racing to prove themselves, make this money, do this thing, status games, you know. But at the end of it, once you get them, is it going to be enough? How much money is enough? How much success is enough, right? I've certainly experienced that same drive in other ways. And it's a relentless feeling that you're not doing enough, you're not achieving enough. And again, you can keep pushing and you get to the next thing, but it's like a mirage. I think fulfillment is actually getting there, savoring and enjoying it, giving yourself the time and the reward, and others, right? So I'm not trying to put a brake on productivity, success and all that sort of thing, but I think, you know, in getting things done, there's a way that you play the game. There's a way that you show up and the way that you're about it. So I think the same thing, like say for example Cal Newport and Ali Abdul, you know, they talk about feel-good productivity, and I think the key thing there is feel good. We all know the feeling where we're doom scrolling, we all know the feeling we're stuck down a rabbit hole or being trapped in a habit that you can't break, right? It all comes from that place. So I think there are steps to a healthy approach, and first, that's why we're going to talk about and understand your thinking, can be flawed, and it is flawed, right? So cognitive shortcuts can turn into patterns that distort your reality. If you can spot these fractals and then challenge them, then it allows you then to step back from your thoughts. You can learn to see your thoughts from a distance, and you're not your thoughts, and they don't define you, and this is where the real change begins. In redefining success, I think you can measure success through your values, not by how much you achieve. You know, I've gone through, I mentioned a couple of funerals. No one sits up and says how much that person achieved, you know, at the funeral. And I don't know whether I'd be sitting there wanting to do it. There's certainly all these needs. And again, I'm not pushing back from these values, you know, security and providing and doing all these things, especially as a male. But as a female, you know, are you going to measure your success or your outcomes by what it is that you're doing, you know, rather than is who you want to be? So there's a having and there's a being. And I think it's about progress, certainly not perfection. There is some good news that you can identify these cognitive distortions, and it doesn't take 20 years on a couch to do it. You'll also find that there's a style of thinking that you'll be prone to. And just like in martial arts, as I mentioned before, that sometimes you just need practice out of getting these holds. And these distortions are psychological holds that will keep you stuck. So it's worth spending on time on learning what they are and how to break free of them. So let's just recap. Achievement addiction is a trap that keeps us chasing validation, but the real challenge lies in the breaking free from the flawed beliefs that actually keep us stuck. And by recognizing our cognitive errors and stepping back from our thoughts, the redefining success, we can start with living a life that is truly our own. My call to action. And if this resonates with you, take a moment to reflect on your own thoughts and patterns. It's never a problem till it's a problem, right? So if it's fine and it's working for you, that's great. If it's not, and you're finding that these things are impacting you, then it's worth learning about. So, what are you really chasing and why? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. So, thanks for watching. If this message spoke to you, please like and subscribe and join me on this journey of vulnerability and a journey of being average and towards a more authentic life. And stay tuned as we dive deeper into each of these cognitive distortions, because we want to understand them, and I think that's the first step in breaking free from their hold. So we'll see you next time. Chris out.